This is the 3-star line experiment in College Football 26 Dynasty. So I wanted to see some new teams in the College Football Playoff in these Dynasty sims that we did. So I thought the best way to do that was to create a 3-star line. Any teams with 3 stars and above would stay in a power conference or move into a power conference, and anything that was 2.5 stars or below would go into the group of 6. If you were already in a power or a group of 6 conference and you had above the 3 stars or below the 3 stars, you weren't moved around. But any teams that were in a power conference that had the 2.5 stars or below did move down to a somewhat geographically aligned conference as best as we could, and while still balancing the conferences out as far as numbers of teams. So Duke and Wake Forest both being in North Carolina, I thought they fit best in the American, being that Charlotte and East Carolina are already there, which I think are the only other North Carolina schools, or I guess App State as well, but I decided to put them in the American. That seemed like the most logical place to put those schools. The ACC did have a couple teams drop out. The only thing that we added was Notre Dame from independent, because I didn't want to have any independent teams with this particular thing. So we added Notre Dame to the ACC. I know a lot of people would want to add them to the Big Ten, but they are an ACC school, so when we are moving them out of independent going forward, we'll be moving them into the ACC unless the conference realignment has something else to do. Otherwise, if we're just moving them out of independent to not be independent, they will be going into the ACC. The Big Ten dropped a couple schools, which we will talk about, but nobody got added to the conference. There was one team that we considered, but we decided not to add them to the conference. That one team was Boise State. I really thought that maybe Boise State would make sense in the Big Ten, but I thought that really realistically they would go to the Big 12. Now, that does make that so that the Big Ten has less teams than the Big 12, which is a little bit weird, but it's not that far off. Big 12 only has 17 schools, as nobody dropped from the Big 12. Everybody in the Big 12 is 3 stars and above. I think actually everybody in the Big 10 is either 3 or 3.5 stars. I don't think that there's any even 4-star teams. Yeah, 3 or 3.5 stars. So very balanced conference, not only in real life, but also in College Football 26 Dynasty. Conference USA, we did move a couple teams over. Rutgers and UConn, as well as Vanderbilt, all got added to Conference USA. 1, it's a smaller conference, so we had some more room to add. And 2, I thought that the Northeast teams, I guess, made sense here because Delaware is already in it, and then Middle Tennessee State is already in there for Vanderbilt. I guess you could have added Vanderbilt to the American, but that's already a bigger conference. I guess you could have added Rutgers and UConn to the MAC, but again, that's already a bigger conference. So we added all of them to Conference USA there. That'll be interesting because Conference USA is by far the worst conference, so one of those teams should be making it out of there in the playoff. The MAC, we added Purdue and Northwestern out of the Big Ten. They both dropped down into the MAC. That pretty obvious. We did still make the changes for Mountain West and Pac-12 that we usually make. Nobody got added to the Mountain West, but we did add Stanford back to the Pac-12. Cal actually is at 3 stars, so they stayed in the ACC. And then Vanderbilt as well as Mississippi State dropped out of the SEC. We added Mississippi State and Virginia to the Sun Belt based on the teams that were already in their conference. So we're going to roll with Vanderbilt on this one just because I think they're going to be one of the most successful teams that we drop down. Again, the idea is to get as many teams that we don't usually see in the playoffs into the playoffs. Vanderbilt definitely fits the bill with that there. But before we get going, make sure that you like and subscribe. We're trying to get to 500 subscribers before the end of the month. We're less than 130 away, so make sure that you're along for the ride. Also a reminder, we're trying to get to 7 videos a week now, so make sure that you tune in every single day and make sure that you let me know if you like the videos or if you don't like the videos, and also some ideas that you might have, because we're going to need as many ideas as possible as we go forward. But with all that, let's go to the first CFP ranking. Folks, things seem to be going our way here. Vanderbilt starts out 7-0. We're in the top 12 in the first CFP poll. So we have Oregon at 7-0, number 1 in the country. Notre Dame, the addition to the ACC, is in the top 5. If you watched our last video that came out on Monday, you'll see that the ACC absolutely dominated, winning multiple championships in a row. So make sure you check that one out that we put out on Monday, which I believe is called Win a Natty, Go Independent. So keep an eye out for that one. That one was a good one. Georgia, Alabama, these are all regular teams there. The ACC gets another one in the top 7 with Louisville. getting some wins. We also got Miami, like I mentioned. Vanderbilt, one of the teams that we dropped down. They are number 11 in the country, so we're seeing some different teams. Virginia Tech is also a different team we don't usually see up this high. Arizona is up higher than a little higher than usual, as well as Arkansas. So we're seeing some different teams up there. No traditional G5s. The only quote-unquote G5 team that we have is Vanderbilt going 7-0. Let's take a look at what they've done. So they get a win over at Texas at the beginning of the season by 1. I think that Texas was ranked higher than us, so we'll have to see about that. But that is a big win to start the season. Big reason why we are in the top 11. We still have a couple SEC games towards the end of the season with Auburn, and then, of course, the rivalry game against Tennessee. So it's not all put away. Winning a lot of close games. 3, 10, 7, 7, 8. It is not like we're blowing people out, but winning every game so far. Let's see if they can keep it up over the final 5 games of the season, even with a couple difficult non-conference matchups. Let's take a look at the conference standings just to see where other teams are ranking. So Rutgers has gone 4-4 in their first season in Conference USA. UConn has gone 4-4 as well. So not great starts for them. Let's look at Purdue. Purdue, we've dropped down in a couple realignment videos or videos with promotion relegation, maybe old videos on my main channel, and they've never done really well. Purdue is 3-4 here, so we'll see if they can pull something off in the MAC. Northwestern is 4-3, so not great from the MAC teams that we put in there. Let's see, Stanford 4-3. One of the teams I was hoping to see kind of make a run would be Oregon State. I know that we've put them in the Pac-12 before. I didn't really know a good way to get Oregon State to the playoff just because it's kind of a rough thing there. They've lost to the Ducks. I mean, that you're always going to have the Civil War, so that's a difficult game. Losing by 1 to Cal, by 5 to Tulsa is not a great start to this. But 4-3 is not terrible for Oregon State. What's some other teams? Sunbelt. Virginia 7-2. Okay, so we can see them ranked here pretty soon. They've gone 7-0 in the Sunbelt, but 0-2. Lost by 3 to Cal on the road, and then lost by 6 to Duke, who's another team that we dropped down. So they've lost to power conference opponents, but they're dominating the lower end. We'll see if they can get an all non-power conference run, and next year maybe they can get a better win rate. Mississippi State is another one that we dropped down into the Sun Belt. So those teams are doing pretty well. Duke is the other one that we dropped down. They're 7-1 in the American. Wake we also dropped down, and they're 5-3. So Duke, I think, will dominate in the final seasons. They do pretty well in the ACC even, but they start off below that 3-star line, so they drop down to the American. I could see them running the American, even though there's some really good teams here. North Texas, Tulane, Memphis all get really good in this sim, so we'll see how that ends up happening. And then I want to see Boise State struggling, 2-6, 2-4 in conference. They also have 2 non-conference losses to USF and San Diego State, so not great for Boise State. What is that? Not great for Boise State in the first season in the Big 12. So we get to the Conference USA Championship game, but we're not the ranked team. Jacksonville State is actually the ranked team, which would be a new appearance if they can somehow find their way into the college football playoff. But it looks like we lost the 2 games at the end of the season that we had against the SEC. Let's check the schedule first before we look at what the other conference championship games look like. Yeah, so we lost to Auburn by 22, and then this game by 8 to Tennessee. I think this Auburn game probably knocked us out of being in the top 12, definitely did. This knocked us out of being ranked at all, I'm sure. But we still have a matchup against Jacksonville State in the Conference USA Championship game. So at least a good start here. Let's take a look at what the conference championship games look like. So we have Clemson and Louisville. We've seen Louisville do pretty well before. They look like they're going to make the playoff this season. Duke does make the American Conference Championship game, but North Texas is the ranked team in that matchup. Indiana, Penn State. So again, the ranked team in the matchup, Vanderbilt makes it, but they are not the ranked team in the matchup. We have another ranked one with the Mountain West. Hawaii makes it. Oregon State did make the Pac-12 championship game, but it doesn't look like the Pac-12 is going to be represented. And then Mississippi State is our other. So Virginia and Mississippi State both make the Sun Belt, but Mississippi State is the ranked team. It looks like Jacksonville State is the one that's most likely to make the playoff if they get the win here. Otherwise, it's probably going to be North Texas. I don't know. It's going to be interesting because they're definitely outmatched in these games where they're ranked. So One of them is going to get ranked. So because we got the 1 here, 2, 3, 4. So all of the Power Conference champions will get the automatic bid. And then there is going to be one from the G6, but we have a couple ranked teams and then a couple non-ranked teams that should be the favorite. I'm thinking that UNLV or Mississippi State are the most likely ones to make the championship game. Let's look at the top 25 and see what we're missing, but I'm curious to see what happens with that. So Texas Tech was... we didn't see Miami. Miami didn't make the conference championship game, but they should be in. A&M also should be in. Arizona State should be in. We don't see Arizona State too often, so it's working a little bit. And Virginia Tech is probably in, with Notre Dame being the team that's on the bubble that will probably fall out. Now, it could be interesting because Penn State could win, and we could see Virginia Tech and Notre Dame both out. So if you're Virginia Tech, you're rooting against Penn State in the Big Ten championship game against Indiana. But Virginia Tech and Arizona State would both be interesting teams to see in. Kind of not exactly how we realigned it for those teams to make it, but still, getting new teams in is the whole point, and Virginia Tech especially would be a new team in the CFP. So this is nothing new. John Mateer winning the Heisman, although under 3,000 yards passing is pretty rough. Probably had a lot of yards running, but still, that is not a Heisman Trophy winning amount of passing yards. Did we win the Conference USA Championship game? Probably not. With us going to the Independence Bowl against Radiance Technology. Why do they need a bowl game? But we're going to the Independence Bowl. I don't think that we won the Conference USA Championship game. We did. Okay, so we are the Conference USA champion as Vanderbilt, but we don't make even the top 25 with that. What does our bracket look like here? So UNLV is the team that made it in. Jacksonville State was the highest ranked G5 or G6 team going in to the conference championship game week. They don't actually end up making the championship game. UNLV does. UNLV is a team that we have seen in. UNLV is also a team that we've seen win, and we've also seen them have a home playoff game. This time, they're playing Alabama, the conference championship game loser in the SEC, with the winner taking on the Big Ten conference champion in the Rose Bowl. Virginia Tech and Arizona State are going to face off in Tempe in the first round. So the two teams that we said were kind of new teams, they are going to face off in the first round. Winner takes on Georgia, the number 1 team in the country, in the Peach Bowl. Notre Dame makes it in from the ACC. So Penn State didn't make it, and then one of the other conference champions dropped down. We'll look at that. But because Virginia Tech and Notre Dame both made it, that means that they moved up. Notre Dame will be facing off against Miami in the first round in a Catholics versus Convicts matchup. Winner takes on undefeated Texas Tech out of the Big 12 in the Cotton Bowl. Louisville versus A&M, both not super common teams, but we have seen them in the playoff as well. But this is a pretty unique conference or college football playoff layout. The winner of that game will play Clemson in the Orange Bowl. So for the ACC, we have Louisville, Miami, Notre Dame, and Clemson. That's 4. The ACC dominance in this new roster update is continuing. Actually, 5 teams. Virginia Tech makes it in as well. So 5 teams out of the ACC. Again, with the new roster update, it becomes very dominant at the ACC. A&M, Georgia, and Alabama are the 3 out of the SEC. We have 2 out of the Big 12 with Texas Tech and Arizona State, 1 out of the Big 10 with Indiana, and 1 out of the Mountain West with UNLV. I want to see what the conference championship team that lost out of the playoff was, because I can't remember exactly who it was. So Penn State, we know. BYU was in the top 10. They ended up losing their way out of the college football playoff with that loss to Texas Tech. Similar to what happened in real life, although this game was 41-38, so a little bit different there. We win the Independence Bowl, I believe, get the single season record for whatever. Yes, we won the Independence Bowl, 12-2 in the first season in Conference USA for Vanderbilt. A great start. Can they get to the playoff next season? They should have gotten to the playoff this season, although we won't have Diego Pavia coming back. What did they get Diego Pavia looking like a 10-year-old boy in that picture? I'm not exactly sure what's going on there. Okay, what happened in the first round of the playoff? So UNLV gets absolutely disgustingly trounced by Alabama in the first round. We had Indiana, Alabama in the Rose Bowl. We saw how that worked out just 2 weeks ago. Virginia Tech gets the win over Arizona State. This is the most interesting team to me in the first year. Virginia Tech doubling up Arizona State on the road. They'll take on Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. That would be an interesting upset if Virginia Tech can get that win. Miami beats Notre Dame by 18. It's Miami, Texas Tech in the Cotton Bowl. And then A&M gets the win over Louisville by 3. It's Clemson, A&M in the Orange Bowl. So the ACC has 3 teams that make it through: Clemson, Miami, and Virginia Tech. Texas Tech is the only Big 12 team that's in the second round. A&M, Georgia, and Alabama are the 3 SEC teams, and then we have the 1 Big 10 team, which has yet to play Indiana. All but one of the teams on the bye make it through. Alabama gets the win over Indiana by 8. That's the one upset in the Rose Bowl in the 4-5. They will take on Georgia, who absolutely crushed our darling team, Virginia Tech, 52-10. So it's Georgia, Alabama in the Peach Bowl. Georgia getting the home game in the semifinal. Texas Tech beats Miami by 10 in the Cotton Bowl. They essentially got a home game. They win by 10 over Miami. Texas Tech will now take on Clemson, who just gets past A&M. So we don't get a Texas Bowl in the Fiesta Bowl between Texas Tech and A&M. It's Clemson and Texas Tech. So 2 SEC teams, 1 Big 12 team, 1 ACC team in our first semifinal. Texas Tech is chasing that elusive 16-0 season if they can win out. Texas Tech and Georgia in the first national championship game. Both teams take care, no problem, in the semifinal. 44-7 for Georgia, 52-27 for Clemson. Both are, I guess technically Texas Tech did not double up, but both teams are winning by 20-plus points, almost 40 points for Georgia in their semifinal. So Texas Tech keeps the perfect season alive. Georgia only has the 1 loss. They're the number 1 team in the country. A battle of the Titans in the national championship game in our first season. Georgia gets the win in the first season. It's been a couple videos since the SEC has won. I think it's been like 6 or 7 videos since the SEC has won best conference in the video. They get a good start here with Georgia getting the win. They have 2 semifinalists in the first season. 43-27, never in doubt for Georgia. Texas Tech just misses out on the perfect season, 15-1 for Georgia in the first season. So the SEC takes the lead and Georgia takes the lead after the first college football playoff. Not as great of a start for Vandy this year, but Rutgers is 8-0. We face them. We're 5-3. They're 8-0. We face them in the upcoming week, so we'll see. Rutgers might find their way to getting ranked after this week, after not a great start in the Conference USA last year for them. Georgia, our defending national champion, is number 1. 8-0, so looks like they are well on their way to another appearance in the college football playoff. A lot of teams that we saw last year, we didn't see Ohio State, we didn't see Oregon in the playoff last year. Texas Tech was obviously our runner-up. Utah we didn't see in the playoff last year. They're up there. Washington's also up there. Louisville's back in there. Duke, one of the teams that we moved into the American from the ACC, is in the top 12. Like I said, I think that they're going to end up being really good because of this change. They have a top 12 matchup with Utah in the non-conference this week, which is an interesting matchup for them. They also played Illinois in the non-conference. They also played James Madison in the non-conference. So very interesting setup they have here. 2 tough games towards the end of the season. If they can win out, they're definitely in the playoff. They're probably a home team in the playoff if they can win out over Utah and Memphis, as well as a road game against Tulsa, which is not easy. So Duke has the work cut out for them, but they are undefeated so far. A couple new teams up here. Mississippi State, who was one of the better teams in the G5 last year. They are 8-0, first in the Sun Belt and well on their way to another conference championship game appearance. Granted, they take care of business in these final 4 games, including against Virginia, who was in the conference championship game against them last year. We saw some other teams up there. Memphis was the team. They're also 9-0. They have to face Duke at the end of the season. That is a very big matchup. Stanford has moved up to 6-2, and New Mexico State in the top 25 as well. So we have some interesting teams up there for sure in this second season. Utah is not a super common playoff opponent or playoff team, but Mississippi State would be the team that I would be most interested out of the group that we have in the top 25 now and actually making the playoff. 6-6 for Vanderbilt, but that's not to say that Conference USA is not interesting this year. New Mexico State at number 14, very well in line for a college football playoff berth. with a win, they could get into the top 12. The American might have something to say about that. Duke is undefeated, 12-0. They just beat Memphis last week. They have a rematch against them in the American Conference Championship game. So that is a very interesting one. Could take away New Mexico State's playoff spot. We've also got Colorado in the top 20. Oregon State's in their second straight Pac-12 championship game. Hawaii is number 25. We see Northwestern making the MAC championship game. So a lot of the teams that we moved down have done pretty well in their conferences. Mississippi State is also in the top 20. Looks like they lost the Egg Bowl. It must have been that they lost the Egg Bowl last week, which probably put them in a spot where they're not going to be able to make the playoff. One thing that New Mexico State could hope for is Memphis wins or Florida State wins. That would give them the fourth or fifth automatic qualifier, assuming that Memphis and Florida State don't jump over them. So New Mexico State is really the most interesting team here. We've got 2 versus 3 in the Big Ten, 1 versus 9 in the SEC, 4 versus 8. So those are all locked up. But the ACC could lose their automatic qualifier. They'll still get a team in, most likely with Clemson. Could lose their automatic qualifier if Florida State wins. Same thing goes for the American if Memphis wins, but Duke should be in either way. Really, it's New Mexico State out of Conference USA that is the pressure point. What does the top 25 tell us that the conference championship games did not? Alabama, we already saw. So Pitt is going to make it in. They were not in the conference championship game screen. Notre Dame and Michigan also look like they're probably going to be in, but they could lose their spots. Oklahoma is almost certainly on the bubble. Not necessarily, because we do have all the conference. We could potentially see up to Oklahoma. Oklahoma State won't make it in, but Oklahoma could make it in. New Mexico State is hoping that that doesn't happen. Memphis is hoping that that doesn't happen. Florida State is hoping that that doesn't happen, but we will see. I just want to double check this Mississippi State. Yeah, they lost the Egg Bowl. Otherwise, they probably are in that same conversation with Memphis and New Mexico State. Let's see what happens going to the bracket. This has to be a real person because that name is too crazy even for AI to come up with. Fluff Bothwell wins the Heisman Trophy, a running back for Clemson. Rushes for almost 1,600 yards on less than 200 carries. Fluff Bothwell is your Heisman Trophy winner for 2026. Vanderbilt is in the famous Idaho Potatoes Bowl. That is a terrible bowl game. You're playing that at Albertson Stadium against Nevada. That's what you get for going 6-6, Vanderbilt. But 2 straight bowl games to start. 12-2 in the first year was much more impressive than 6-6 in Conference USA this year. But do our Conference USA brethren make it in? New Mexico State. Does New Mexico State make it into the college football playoff? They do not. Oklahoma State makes it in. Duke makes it in as our G5 representative. Utah gets a top 3 seed. Oklahoma dropped. I'm not sure what exactly happened there. This is not that interesting of a playoff. Okay. Oregon, Oklahoma State in the first round. Winner takes on Duke in the Cotton Bowl. Texas Tech and Notre Dame, both teams were in last year. They're in again. They will take on another team that was in again in Alabama. The first 3 teams that we named off did not make it last year. Duke is 13-0. Could be going for a perfect season. Georgia and Clemson both were in last year. Clemson, of course, has Fluff Bothwell, who is our Heisman Trophy winner. The winner will take on Utah, who was not in last season. And then these final 3 teams, Michigan, Pitt, and Ohio State, all were not in last season. The first 2 will be facing off to play the last one in the Peach Bowl. So new teams, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 new teams in, right? 3, 4. Yeah, 7 new teams in this year, 5 teams that were in last year. We have 1, 2, 3 teams from the Big Ten. We have 2 teams from the Big 12, Utah and Texas Tech. We have 3 teams from the Big 12, including Oklahoma State. 2 teams from the ACC, Pitt and Clemson. 2 teams from the SEC, Alabama and Georgia. 1 team from the American with Duke. What happened to New Mexico State? Why are they not in the playoff here? They lost to Rutgers. If they would have won, it wouldn't have mattered. If they would have won, maybe they jump up into the top 12 over Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, but they lost. by 2 touchdowns, so New Mexico State didn't make it in. That's one of the things about having these other teams in the conferences. Rutgers is a higher rated team than New Mexico State, so that would have been an upset for New Mexico State, even though they were the closest one to making it in. That sucks. Let's see what happens in the first round. We win the Idaho Potatoes Bowl, so that's 2 straight bowl wins. We went 12-2 in the first season. Can Vanderbilt get it together and win Conference USA and get into the playoff before the end of this? We've had one team so far that has dropped down and won their playoff or won their conference, made it to the playoffs. That is Duke, but that's not really what we're looking for because Duke makes it almost every time we sim. So they will have a chance to win a game here. They take on Oregon in the second round after Oregon crushes Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State is a somewhat new team. They make it from time to time, but that was, I guess, our least common team that made it this year. Texas Tech gets a win over Notre Dame. They'll take on Alabama. That was chalk at the top. At the bottom, it was a little different. Georgia, our defending national champion, wins 44-7 over Clemson in the first round. They'll take on Utah, the Big 12 champion, in the Fiesta Bowl, a rare home game or semi-home game for a West Coast team in the playoff. Utah is not too far from Arizona, so we could see, if this was actually to happen in real life, Utah actually filling the place up and not getting a disadvantage for the West Coast teams like they do every year in the playoff. Ohio State and Michigan will face off. That is a rematch, of course, of the game that has been played earlier in the season. Looks like Ohio State probably won that earlier in the season, but Ohio State and Michigan in the Peach Bowl for the one that really matters to get to the semifinals. So we get 3 Big Ten teams that move on or are in the second round. 2 SEC teams, Georgia and Alabama, 2 Big 12 teams, and 1 American team. No ACC. No ACC makes it to the quarterfinal, again, after the ACC dominated our last video, all video long. Duke does get the win. We actually get full-on chalk in the quarterfinal. Duke gets the win by 2 over Oregon, keeping their undefeated season alive, keeping our chance of having one of our teams that dropped down actually win a national championship. Again, that wouldn't be that crazy because Duke does win. I have seen Duke win a national championship in the ACC. I have seen them make the college football playoff a lot of different videos in the ACC, so it's not that surprising, but still, they do make the cut for being a team that was dropped down. And moving on, they'll take on Alabama, who gets past Texas Tech by 1 in the Orange Bowl. Utah gets the win by 10 over Georgia. It would be interesting to see Utah win a national championship. This is probably the best I've seen Utah do in a season in a sim before, so that is a good win for them. 8-point win for Ohio State over Michigan in the rematch. So it's Ohio State, Utah in the Rose Bowl. Could have been an old school Rose Bowl matchup. Maybe they did play at an old school Rose Bowl. I'm not sure. And then Alabama, Duke in the Sugar Bowl. In the American SEC. So all from different conferences in our semifinal. Utah doesn't make it through. They get crushed by Ohio State in the Rose Bowl 38-13. Duke does do some damage to Alabama 48-28. They win by 20. So it's Ohio State, Duke in Vegas. Man, Utah, you had the West Coast setup. They got Arizona, California, and they would have had Vegas. They could have had their fans at all those games, but they get crushed by Ohio State. Damn, a Duke-Utah national championship would have been interesting, but we get Ohio State and Duke instead. Duke is looking for the perfect season, looking for a G5 championship. Ohio State is looking to put the Big Ten on the board for the second victory, for the second season, their first victory in the second season to tie up with the SEC. And it is Ohio State in the end. We had a lot of promise with that semifinal. Ends up with just Ohio State crushing Duke 38-6 in the national championship game. The Big Ten probably ties up with the SEC as far as best. The SEC has a slight edge because they had more semifinal teams, but it's all going to come down to the final season as far as who is the best conference. Ohio State and Georgia. Georgia is also probably slightly ahead because they've made 2 playoff teams. So Georgia's slightly ahead in the best team. SEC slightly ahead in the best conference, but it's all to play for in the final season. Can we see one of these teams that we don't traditionally see from one of the conferences that we drop down into make a run? Could we see the American make another run to the national championship? Could Utah keep it together and actually win a national championship? That would be an interesting turn to this video. Vanderbilt had their chance in the first season. They lost it, and now we're 3-5 at this point. Not great. Oklahoma State is back in the top 10 this year. That's interesting. Duke is also back in the top 10 after making their run last year. Let's see if they can keep it together. They got a win over Auburn on the road earlier. Rice, East Carolina, and FIU, or UTSA as well. They should be able to keep it together and hopefully get another first-round bye or at least a first-round home game, see if they can actually get a win in a national championship game after falling short last season. We also have Utah in the top 16. They already have 2 losses, which is not great. They lost to UCF and Oklahoma State on the road. UCF is not a good loss. Oklahoma State is fine. They have a chance to get back to the college football playoff. I was really hoping to see them win. That would have been cool, a different kind of thing to have happen. UConn is our highest rated G5 team. We've also got UAB. UConn's second in Conference USA. So who's number 1 in I guess Duke is technically our highest rated G5 team. Who's number 1 in Conference USA? Let's see. They lost to Louisiana Tech. Let's go look at the conference races here, because not something very exciting in the one that we're looking at there. Jacksonville State is number 1. Okay, Jacksonville State is going to end up failing. So UConn could potentially be our team that makes it out of Conference USA. We have yet to have one as of yet. The American, we have 2 chances with Duke and UAB up there. Northwestern, nothing really happening with the MAC. Mountain West, maybe you could see New Mexico shoot up if they continue to win out. The Pac-12, probably not. Maybe Fresno State. Sun Belt, Mississippi State does have a chance. They're 8-0. Haven't played anybody tough as of yet. But if they win out, especially if they win the Egg Bowl, if they can get the payback from last year, where the Egg Bowl probably knocked them out of serious playoff contention at the end of the season, if they can win out, they have an FCS game, ODU, Virginia on the road, and then Ole Miss at home. If they can get those wins, we should see Mississippi State in the playoff in this year. Otherwise, it's going to be tough to see a new G5 team other than Duke this year. All right, so we have a couple interesting things that have happened here. Mississippi State didn't get the win in the Egg Bowl, so it doesn't look like they're going to get into the playoff. We have Hawaii in the top 25. UConn is top 20. They're not probably going to get in the playoff. Duke and UAB is interesting. Duke is undefeated. UAB could get the win and get the 5th spot there. It's going to go to the American either way, and I think Duke is in either way. So UAB is a rather interesting one. We've seen them in the playoff before, but it doesn't happen very often. Utah is back in the top 12. They lost earlier in the season to Oklahoma State. Can they get the win? Can they get either a home game or a first-round bye again this season and potentially make their way back? Last year, of course, they got blown out by Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, but if they can get back, it would be very interesting to see. Utah is definitely not a team that you usually see towards the top, but I like the idea of them making a run to the college football playoff. Alabama is in the game against Texas, so I think the American, this is interesting with Texas, but I think the American wraps up the 5th spot either way. I don't see any way that Texas wins and one of these schools come in. There's no unranked teams from the power conferences that could make them lose the automatic qualifier spot. So we probably only have UAB as kind of the most out there team that could potentially make it in to the college football playoff. Nothing that interesting from the top 25 either. Notre Dame, I think, is going to make it in for their 3rd straight season, which is not super common. We've also got Nebraska and Florida State, who make it from time to time, but are not super common teams, so that is something. Ohio State, with a loss to Michigan at the end of the season, could be on the outside looking in going into the playoff here with UAB potentially taking that spot from them. If UAB wins, Ohio State probably is still in. They're taking the spot away from Oklahoma State. Pitt could find their way in. Washington could find their way in, but nothing that interesting below that. We do see that Boise State got into the top 25 in the final season, moving up to the Big 12. That was the most challenging move, was Boise State moving up. They were started at 3.5 stars, so that was the most challenging move. Probably better than moving in the Big Ten, but still, they did not succeed, as we usually see Boise State either in 1 or 2 college football playoffs if we just do regular setup. We get Kamario Taylor out of Mississippi State to win the Heisman. So we don't get Mississippi State to make the playoff because they have been failing in the Egg Bowl at the end of the season, but we get a Heisman Trophy winner out of the Sun Belt? The Sun Belt. Mississippi State's in the Sun Belt. Out of the Sun Belt. Very interesting. Okay, that is a interesting change I wasn't expecting. But okay, you get that. That is something. We've had Duke make the national championship game out of the American, which is something. Let's see what our college football playoff bracket looks like. So Duke makes it in. We didn't get UAB in. Nothing that interesting, but we do get Utah and Duke set to face off in the quarterfinal. That sucks. I really wanted Utah and Duke in the national championship game. We could have gotten it last season. Louisville is a somewhat interesting team. After winning the ACC championship, they'll face off against Ohio State in the first round. Winner takes on Notre Dame. Michigan and Clemson in the 7-10. Winner takes on Alabama. Florida State and Nebraska. Winner takes on Oregon in the Rose Bowl. Utah and Pitt in the first round. Winner takes on Duke in the quarterfinal. So the ACC has 5 teams in: Clemson, Notre Dame, Louisville, Florida State, and Pitt. The Big 12 has 1 team in with Utah. The Big 10 has 4 teams in: Oregon, Nebraska, Ohio State, and Michigan. The SEC only has 1 team in with Alabama, and then the American gets their team in with Duke. So the ACC does have another really good video, getting a lot of playoff teams, but they haven't had anybody that's made it to the national championship game. Duke could put the American in the conversation for the best conference overall. Duke could also look at being the best team overall if they could win the national championship game. That's probably the most interesting thing that could happen here. Duke wins it with Ohio State, Georgia didn't make it this year. Ohio State's only made 2. Duke has made 2. If they win, they could. Depends on what happens with Ohio State. But if they win and Ohio State loses in the first round, for example, I'm going to say Duke gets best team in the video. Oregon makes their first one. Notre Dame has been in all 3. They could be best team in the video. Alabama's been in all 3. They could be best team in the video. Utah, probably not. There's a chance. I guess Utah, Duke have made 2. Michigan has made 2 or 3. We'll see about Michigan. I think Michigan and Clemson both have also made 3. Louisville has made 2 as well. So there's quite a few teams up for best team in the video, including Georgia just winning it from winning the first season. They're still in the lead, but there's a lot of teams that could take the lead. Nebraska, Oregon, Florida State, Pitt, they're all out of the race as this is their first time in. Utah doesn't get the win, but I would say a salute to Utah. They are one of the more interesting teams in this video. Louisville gets the win over Ohio State, keeping Duke's chances alive for being best team in the video. We've also got Notre Dame with their chances alive, and Clemson with their chances alive, and Alabama with their chances alive, all by virtue of making it 3 straight times. Duke will take on Pitt in the second round after Pitt wins by 17. Florida State trounces Nebraska. They will take on Florida State in the Rose Bowl, a rematch of the 2014 playoff. Check out my video that I did today on my main channel, which is if the college football playoff was 12 teams starting from 2014. That is interesting. I'm going to be doing a kind of sim video that's not college football dynasty, but actually running through the playoff for some of those seasons. I'm going to try one this week. One of my subscribers on that channel wanted me to try it out, so I'm going to try those out. So check out that video on my main channel if you want to kind of get some context for what's going on and just see some kind of interesting what ifs. Louisville gets the win over Ohio State, so Louisville takes on Notre Dame in an all ACC matchup. So we have 5 ACC teams. All the ACC teams make it through to the second round. Clemson, Notre Dame, Louisville, Florida State, and Pitt. Of course, Duke is an American team, but they are also from the ACC, so that is crazy. 1 Big Ten team makes it through in Oregon. 1 SEC team in Alabama. Actually, only ACC teams won the first round matchups. And then the 2 that made it through, or the 3 that made it through that are not, were just already in the second round. So we'll see if Duke can get the wins here. Duke does move through. Now, a reminder, Duke has lost 1 game in the past 2 seasons. That was the national championship game against Ohio State. So Duke is very much alive for best team in the video. What's interesting here is that we've only had 1 team with a bye lose in the CFP so far, which is not generally what happens. We have a lot of teams that are not in the top 4 make it through to the semifinal generally, and that's also happened in real life, but so far only 1 team has lost with the bye in our video so far. Oregon gets a win over Florida State, 31-23. Oregon and Duke in the Orange Bowl for a chance at the national championship game. Notre Dame gets the win over Louisville, and Alabama gets the win over Clemson. Notre Dame and Alabama are both alive for best team in the video. So the only team winning here that doesn't get best team in the video is Oregon. If Oregon wins, it goes to Georgia. Anybody else wins the national championship game, they are best team in the video. Duke loses 41-22 to the Ducks. Ducks get through. They'll take on Alabama in the national championship game. Alabama won by 15 in the Cotton Bowl. So, stakes here. Oregon wins. Georgia gets best team in the video. The Big Ten gets best conference in the video. Alabama wins. Alabama gets best team in the video. And the SEC gets best conference in the video. It's all to play for. 1 versus 2. Big Ten versus SEC in New Orleans in the Superdome. All the marbles go down to this game. Ducks have been getting a lot of national championships in CFB 26. That's great because they haven't been getting any in real life, unfortunately. Ducks win 49-28 by 3 touchdowns over Alabama. So that means that the Big Ten, by virtue of Ohio State and Oregon both winning national championships, gets the best conference in the video. Georgia, by virtue of winning playoff games in multiple playoffs as well as winning a national championship, gets best team in the video. Duke was a close contender. Utah had a great video. Alabama had a great video as well. If Alabama would have won, they could have gotten it, but they've come up short. So this is what happens when you do the 3-star line experiment in College Football 26 Dynasty.